You ever wake up one morning, step outside to grab your coffee and realize your piece just got a parking ticket? That's pretty much how my week started. My name's Derek Malone, and I've lived in Cypress Ridge Estates, a so-called quiet HOA neighborhood in northern Georgia, for almost 12 years. I built my place from the ground up, poured my own concrete driveway, planted the pecan trees, even designed the mailbox. I pay my taxes, keep my yard clean, and honestly, I thought I was the kind of neighbor every HOA would brag about. Turns out, that counts for nothing when a clipboard queen named Marla Denton is running the board. It started the Monday after Thanksgiving. I'd parked my Ford F-250 on my driveway, because the garage was full of lumber and tools for a porch extension I was building for my wife, Amy. The next morning, there's this yellow slip tucked under my wiper blade. Unauthorized vehicle parking, $250 fine. At first, I laughed. I thought maybe it was some prank from the high schoolers down the street. But nope, official HOA letterhead signed and everything. I called Marla, the HOA president, just to clear it up. She answered like she'd been waiting for me. "Mr. Malone," she said in that syrupy tone people use when they're about to ruin your day. "The association regulations prohibit trucks being parked in driveways overnight. It disrupts the aesthetic harmony of the community," I said. "Ma'am, it's my driveway, and that truck's registered to my name, same as the land it's sitting on." And she said, "I kid you not. All driveways are part of the shared aesthetic easement. You don't actually own that surface. You just have the right to use it under HOA guidelines." That's when my laugh died. I spent the rest of that afternoon flipping through every closing document I'd kept in a dusty file cabinet since 2012. The plat map, the deed, the property survey, all clearly marked that the concrete driveway was inside my property line. I took photos, printed copies, highlighted sections like a college kid before finals, and emailed everything to the HOA office. Next morning, I get another letter. Same envelope, same tone, but this time the fines doubled, $500, and a warning that the vehicle would be towed if it wasn't removed in 48 hours. I called again, trying to stay calm. "Marla, I sent proof. It's my land," she said. "Mr. Malone, we've reviewed your documents, but the board's decision stands. Perhaps you should have read the community handbook more closely before purchasing property here." Then she hung up. That's when something inside me snapped. Not anger. Exactly, more like a click of realization. These people weren't about rules. They were about control. I moved the truck to the street just to avoid escalation. But that night, as I was sitting on the porch with Amy, I watched Marla's Range Rover roll by real slow, window down, camera phone aimed straight at my house. She didn't even hide it. Amy squeezed my hand, whispered, "She's looking for trouble," I said, then she just found it. The next morning, I started digging, not with a shovel, but with paperwork. I went to the county clerk's office downtown, requested the full land survey record, and found something the HOA either didn't know or hoped I'd never notice. My driveway extended 12 feet beyond the HOA's mapped jurisdiction, meaning legally, that stretch of concrete wasn't part of the community at all. It was pure, unregulated private property, and that gave me an idea, a small, petty spark at first. But it grew fast. Before pulling the trigger, though, I wanted to be sure. So I talked to my neighbor, Rick, who'd been on the HOA board years ago before quitting over creative differences, which is a polite way to say he couldn't stand Marla. He leaned against his fence, took a sip of beer and said, "She's been itching to make an example out of somebody. Last year she fined a widow for hanging Christmas lights 2 weeks early," I said. "So she thinks this is about a truck?" He grinned. "Nah, it's about power." That night I lay awake thinking. I could fight them with lawyers, spend thousands, or I could use the one thing they couldn't stand, their own rules twisted back at them. Next day I called a land use attorney, a calm old guy named Mr. Hanley, who'd been fighting HOAs since before Marla probably learned to spell the word. After reviewing my deed and the survey, he leaned back and said, "You're in luck. That driveway's all yours. You can do whatever you want with it. If the HOA tries to enforce fines there, they're trespassing." I smiled. "So if I wanted to rename it a private road?" He shrugged. "Legally? Sure. You'd need a zoning acknowledgement, maybe a new street designation. But if you're patient, you could make it happen. That was it. The plan solidified. For the next 2 weeks, I filed forms, paid small fees, drew up diagrams, and politely ignored the growing stack of HOA letters piling on my doorstep. Amy thought I was crazy, but when she saw the fire in my eyes, she said, "All right, just don't get arrested." Then, one bright Friday morning, 2 surveyors showed up with their tripods and lasers, measuring every inch of my driveway while Marla stood across the street, hands on her hips like she was watching a crime unfold. She yelled, "What are you doing?" "You need HOA approval for modifications." I smiled, waved, and said, "Not this time, Marla." By Monday, I had a shiny new sign delivered from a local metalworks shop. Heavy aluminum, reflective letters, private road, no HOA access, trespassers will be prosecuted. I bolted it right at the start of my driveway, where everyone could see it. The reaction was immediate. Within an hour, Marla and 2 board members marched over, clipboards in hand. She pointed at the sign and said, "You can't just declare your driveway a private road. That violates the neighborhood's visual uniformity clause." I handed her a printed document, county approval stamped and signed. "Actually, I can, and according to Section 14 of the HOA Charter, your jurisdiction stops exactly 12 feet short of this line. That means you're standing on private property right now." She froze. I added, "So technically you're trespassing," one of the board guys whispered. "Maybe we should go." But Marla stayed, red in the face, lips tight. "You think you can defy the board, Mr. Malone? We'll see how long your little stunt lasts," I said. "As long as it takes for you to find another driveway to bully." They left. I could feel my pulse hammering, but for the first time in weeks. It wasn't anger. It was adrenaline mixed with justice. That evening, I installed 2 motion cameras at the base of the driveway and another on the porch, just in case they tried anything stupid. I slept like a rock that night. Next morning, though, my phone buzzed with notifications. Turns out, Marla had posted a full-blown rant on the HOA's Facebook page. Certain residents believe they're above community standards and have chosen to isolate themselves with unauthorized signage. This behavior undermines unity. Within hours, the comment section exploded. Half the neighbors defending me, half siding with her. Rick texted me a screenshot with the caption, "You broke the internet. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just wanted peace." But once you stand up to a bully, you become the symbol for everyone they've pushed around. A few nights later, I caught headlights flashing at the end of my driveway. Someone had parked there, probably HOA patrol. Then I saw movement. A man stepping out trying to unscrew the new sign. I hit the porch light and called out, "That's recorded, pal. Keep going and it's trespassing." The guy froze, hopped back in his car, and took off. I sent the footage straight to the county sheriff's office. They paid Marla a little visit next morning. After that, the HOA meetings went awfully quiet. But quiet doesn't mean over. The next week, I got a thick envelope. Notice of non-compliance in community. Disruption. They accused me of creating an unsafe obstruction to emergency access and demanded removal of all signs and barriers within 7 days, so I did what any stubborn man with a bit of legal backing would do. I went bigger. I hired a paving company, real professionals, to extend the concrete 2 more feet on each side, just enough to clearly mark the borderline between my land and theirs. Then I painted a clean white stripe across it. Like the finish line of a race I'd already won, Amy thought I was being theatrical. But when she saw neighbors slowing down to read the private road sign, their expressions shifting from confusion to quiet admiration, she smiled. "You just turned a driveway into a statement," she said. "Good," I told her. "Maybe they'll finally read the fine print." But Marla wasn't done. She filed a complaint with the fire marshal, claiming my barrier could block emergency vehicles. So the fire marshal came out one afternoon, clipboard in hand. I walked him through everything, showed him the measurements, the turn radius, the clearance. He nodded and said, "You're good. HOA's got no say here." Then he leaned closer and whispered, "Between you and me, she's called us about 6 other houses this month." When he left, I poured myself a coffee and watched the sunset from the edge of that unsafe obstruction, feeling the sweetest peace I'd had in years. But you know how bullies operate. When you hit them with logic, they switch to gossip. Suddenly, whispers started circulating. That I was unstable, that I threatened board members, that my cameras were spying on the neighborhood. It would have been funny if it weren't so predictable. Still, I stayed calm. Let them talk. I had one last move left, something that'd seal this once and for all. I waited until mid-March to make my final move. By then, the HOA's obsession with me had turned into a kind of silent siege. They'd stopped sending letters, but I could feel eyes on me every time I mowed the lawn or backed out my truck. It was like living in a fishbowl full of judgment. Then one afternoon, while sorting mail, I noticed a flyer. Cypress Ridge HOA Annual Meeting, Community Hall, March 19th. That was my chance. I showed up early, wearing jeans and a faded flannel, just to remind them I wasn't there to play politics. When Marla saw me walk in, her smile tightened like a rusted hinge. "Oh, Mr. Malone," she said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Didn't expect you to join us. Considering you've declared yourself independent from the neighborhood," I grinned. "Still pay my dues, don't I? Figure that earns me a chair." The room went quiet. 40, maybe 50 people packed in folding chairs, whispering behind styrofoam cups of coffee. Marla cleared her throat and launched into her speech about community image and cohesive standards. Then she clicked to a slide, a photo of my driveway. The bold private road sign glared from the screen like a wanted poster. She said, "Some residents have taken actions that undermine our collective values. We must vote on whether such defiance warrants suspension of membership privileges." I stood up slowly. "Mind if I say something?" She hesitated. Briefly. So I walked to the front, took the mic, and for the first time in months I spoke not from anger, but from principle. "Look," I said, "I bought my home here because I loved this neighborhood. I built that driveway myself, paid for every inch. When I parked my truck there, I wasn't breaking a rule. I was living my life. But instead of asking why, or maybe walking over to talk to me like a neighbor, this board decided to fine me. Not once, not twice, but 3 times, for using what I already own." Murmurs filled the room. I continued. "When I proved it was my land, you doubled down. You called me non-compliant. You tried to tow my vehicle, label me a troublemaker, even filed false reports. But the county confirmed the truth. That stretch of concrete isn't yours to police. So I did what the law allowed. I made it private. Because if the HOA can't respect boundaries on paper, maybe it'll learn to respect them on the ground." Rick clapped first, loud and sharp. Then others joined, slowly at first, then all at once. Marla's face turned the shade of a stop sign. I handed the mic back and said, "If your idea of community is control, count me out. But if it's respect, for property, for people, then I'll always be part of it." And I walked out. That meeting changed everything. 2 days later, I got a call from a board member, not Marla, but Tom, the treasurer. He said, "You might want to check the mailbox." Inside was an envelope labeled HOA Resolution Update. It said the fines were rescinded, all previous charges voided, and the board would review jurisdictional boundaries in future enforcement, which was their way of admitting defeat without saying the word. But that wasn't the best part. A week after that, a petition started circulating to remove Marla from her position. By the end of the month, it had over 80 signatures. She resigned citing health reasons, which I'm sure meant ego injuries. Funny thing, once she left, the neighborhood felt different, softer somehow. People waved again. Kids played basketball in driveways without someone threatening fines. Rick grilled burgers every Sunday and joked about painting his patio neon pink just to test the new leadership. I didn't need to keep fighting anymore. Still, I wanted one last reminder. Not for them, but for me. So I added a second sign under the private road one. Smaller brushed steel letters that read, "Respect is free, control is expensive." A few days later, Tom stopped by with a coffee in hand. "You know," he said, "Marla's gone, but that sign's gonna keep her spirit alive." I laughed. "Oh, good. Maybe it'll haunt the next one who tries." He looked down the road, then back at me. "You ever think about joining the board?" "Not my kind of power trip," I said. "Besides, I already run the most exclusive road in town." He laughed and left, shaking his head. Months passed. The trees bloomed, the air softened, and life settled into something peaceful again. But every time I walked down that driveway, I'd glance at the faded line of paint dividing my property from theirs. That thin stripe of concrete where a neighborhood's illusion of control stopped. And a man's right to stand his ground began, you know. I think that's what this whole thing taught me. It's not just about property lines or fines. It's about how small people in small positions can convince themselves they own more than they do. And how quickly that illusion crumbles when someone finally says, "No." Amy once told me, "You fight best when you're calm." I didn't get it back then, but now I do. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. A signpost gleaming in the sunlight. A gate that opens only for the people who treat you right. Now, every evening when the sun sets behind those pecan trees, I watch the orange light crawl across my driveway, my road, and I can't help but smile. Because peace, the real kind, doesn't come from silence or submission. It comes from drawing your own line and daring anyone to cross it. And yeah, sometimes it comes with a $250 fine attached. So tell me, what would you have done? Would you have paid the fine just to keep the peace? Or would you have drawn your own line too? Drop your thoughts down below. I'm curious what you think about HOAs, about control, about when standing your ground becomes the only option left. Because maybe the question isn't whether I went too far. Maybe it's whether I went far enough.